A teaching has emerged among many Jewish, Messianic, and Christian organizations that holds that no one has to pay tithe anymore because the tithe was for the Leviim, the Levites, and it was to maintain the Hechal, the temple. The thinking is that if there is no Hechal, there are no Leviim, there's no reason to pay the tithe. Is this thinking correct? Or is it another case of Western thinking creeping into an Eastern religion? Do the Gentiles need to pay tithes since only the Yehudim, only the Jews were commanded to? What was the function of the Leviim, of the Levites? Did they just go around doing ceremonial things, all the while collecting money? What is a tithe? Is it 10% of the gross or the net? The Bible, Hebrew and Christians, never specifically mentioned paying a tithe on computer programming, nursing or banking, etc. Did it? Are we stealing from God if we don't pay our tithes? Or is that just something that people who want to separate us from our money say? The name of this message is 10%. All right. So please stand and cover yourselves for the reading of our scriptures. For those of you who don't know, I'm tethered. I can't stand. But it's not a law. It's just a tradition. The tradition we follow because Yeshua and his Talmudim, the Christians know it as Jesus and his disciples, they did this. And so if they did this, we do this. Our first verse comes from Numbers chapter 18, verse 26. And it says, Ve'el ha-leviim tedaber va'amata alehem kitikhu me'et b'nei Yisrael et hama'aser asher natati lachem me'itam benaha lechem va'heremotem mimenu te rimat Yahweh ma'aser min hama'aser. Our next verse comes from Leviticus 27:30. The whole masar haaretz mi zerah haaretz mipri haetz layabe hu kodesh layabe. And then moving down to 32 from there, the whole masar bakar vatzon kol asher ya'avor tahat hashavet ha'asiri yiyeh kodesh layave. You may be seated. All right, Lamb Squad and a 30. Don't answer that. Okay, our first verse, if you'll recall, is Numbers 18:26, and our first word is the El. El is God, but it's also to or toward. In this case, it's to or toward. It's of motion. It's of turning. You have turned this way to that. That's what you get. The next word is ha-leviim. It's the Levites, as they're known. There's nothing. I haven't said this in a while, so maybe I should say it now. In Hebrew, in biblical Hebrew, a noun is a noun is a noun is a noun. We do not translate nouns. We just, if it's Leviim, we write Leviim. We don't say it means this and it means that. We don't try to find meaning in nouns because in Hebrew, in biblical Hebrew, a noun was just a noun. It just named something, and that's all it did. It was for no other use. In fact, a proper Hebrew sentence does not require nouns. In English, they do. In Hebrew, they do not. Biblical Hebrew, anyway. I don't know about modern. The word that follows that is tedaber. Do you hear davar here? Daber. Shall speak. The tate in front of it is either she speaks or it's a command, shall speak. You know that by the sentence itself. This is shall. It's of setting in a row. It's of ranging in an order. hence to lead, to guide, especially to lead flocks or herds to pasture, to rule, to direct people, to bring into order, to subdue. The much used and in the verb, the most frequent meaning, to speak properly, to put words in order, in the signification of connecting and saying. So this is not just start blurting off what's coming off the top of your head. This is ordered words. This is think it out, think it through, write it down, rewrite it 3 or 4 times. Make sure these words are exact. So our next word is ba'amarta. So once you've thought it out and you've worked it out and you know exactly what to say, then ba'amarta, then say it. It's to say. The primary signification is to bring forth, hence to bring to light. In short, it's to shed light on the subject. You know, you can bring all these words together in your mind and get all this thing arranged just perfect, but if you don't say it, nothing's ever going to be brought to light. So you think it out, you arrange these words in a very specific order, make sure that you don't. When people get on TV, they say a lot because they haven't thought about what they're going to say before they say it. So okay. So I was going to do this, and then that guy over there. It's your vocal pause. it's like saying, wait a minute, wait. You follow what I'm saying? So we don't want to do that. This isn't what we're talking about. We're talking about get on there in front of that camera and you say exactly what you're supposed to say, and don't you stray from that. So then you speak it. First you think it through, then you speak it. Then it's alehem. You speak it to them properly, a noun indicative of motion. So you're going to turn and look them in the face. You're going to say this thing. You're going to bring it to light, these very specially arranged words, and say it to them. You're going to turn toward them. Then the next word is ki, which is for or because. Then it's tikhu. Literally, that's take heed. It's to take, to stick together, to adhere to take for oneself, especially to take a wife, to take a possession, to occupy, as in occupy a city, to send after, to fetch, to take, which is to receive. So they use this word for marriage because a man takes a wife. He takes her to himself. They become one. That's the word. Then it's me'et, which is of or from. It's a part taken from the whole. The best description I know is if you could think of a piece of pie and you cut it up in all those little sections, then you take the little piece of it out. That's what this word is you're taking a part from the whole. You're not going to sit there and eat the whole pie. You're just going to take a piece of it. Then it's B'nai, which is children. Yisrael. So you say it to the children of Yisrael, of Israel as we know it today. You're not going to say this to the Gentiles. You're not going to say this to the Americans. You're not going to say this to the Christians, the Mormons, the Jews, I should say Jews. That Israel is the Jews, but so you will say it to them. But that's who you're going to say it to, the Jews, Israel. Et, which is a pointer, it's just a grammar thing. Hama'aser, the tithe. And again, tithe is 10%. I should say, though, people in America, particularly in the West and particularly in America, we think of a tithe as 10% because literally it is 10%. But you understand that in the Bible, the tithe is only one of the things that you offer to God. The truth is, according to the Bible, depending on how you read a couple of verses, you give between 20 and 21 to even up to 23% of your total gross income is what we think of as the tithe. That's how much of what you make is supposed to go to God. Because you have the 10% on your increase, the tithe, but you also have the offerings that you give at the 3 major events. You have the free will offerings and a number of others that you're supposed to give. And when you're done with all of that, like I said, it's between 20 and 23% of everything that you make goes to that. The gross, not the net. So today we're just talking about the 10% of the increase, which is the tithe. Then it's asher, which natati, will give I, literally. It's to give, it's to cause to receive. I've had a lot of people say they were going to give us this ministry money. You know, I like to tell that story about that guy that he brought a camera bag, is what I'm pretty sure it was, and it had, he said, 20 some odd $1,000 in it. And he opened it up to show it to us, and I'm pretty sure he was telling the truth. I never saw so much cash in my life. And he was going to give it to us. So I was like reaching across the table to take it, and he pulled it back. Oh, I'll give it to you tomorrow or the next day or whenever it was. I thought, but I'm sitting right here. He never caused me to receive that money, though. So he didn't give it to us either. To cause to receive. It's not saying that you're going to give. It's not meaning to give. You know, I was going to, but then bills came up, and then I saw something pretty and had to buy it. No, this is to cause to receive. It's real giving. Lachem, to you, me itam, which is from them. This is that part taken from a whole. Benahalachem, inheritance. It's the taking of a possession, the occupation of something. It's what you think of. You inherit something. It's something that is given to you, and in this case, it's your lot. You know, this is your lot. This is what's been given to you. This is what you inherit. Bahe remotem, and heave offering. So when you collect this 10th part from those people, you're going to lift it up and make a heave offering. And the heave offering, you've probably seen it, maybe even on a movie, where they take something and they lift it up and they swing it, and then they turn and they swing it, and then they turn, and that's a heave offering. To lift up oneself, to rise up, to raise up. So you're raising up this offering, right? The heart is lifted up. Of course, that's use of pride. The eye is lifted up. That's to be lofty. So again, it's pride. To show oneself powerful, to triumph over somebody may not be of pride, but you're lifted up because you won. So anyway. To be extolled with praises is to be lifted up. You're lifting up the praises, and it's lifting up. So if you're praising God, you're lifting God up, right? You're lifting up your praises to God, and in doing so, somehow that magnifies God. That lifts God up. But it's the idea of lifting up. So you take the offering and you lift it up and you wave it. Then it's mimanu, it's from it. So you've taken this 10th part from the people, and you've lifted it up and you wave it in the air, and then from that, terumat, you make an offering, and it's an oblation, it's an offering, it's a gift, stuff that's brought to the temple. It's from the root room, as you say in Hebrew, to lift up oneself, to rise up. It's the same word. So you're going to lift up this offering from that to Yahweh, and this is ma aser, a tenth. So you're taking a tenth of what the people have, and you're raising it up as a wave offering, and then from that money that you've raised up. So let's say you went around the village and you've brought in $1,000, and from that $1,000, now you, the one who collected the money, have to give a 10th part of that to the temple. So from that, you take a 10th, meaning the part that's taken out of the whole, hamaser. So you take a 10th and you make it a tithe. So the people who collect the tithe also make a tithe on that tithe for themselves. So here's my very long-winded translation. And to the Levi'im you shall speak and say, take it from the children of Israel, the tithe, which I will give to you from them for an inheritance for them, and they, the Levi'im, will make a heave offering from it and offer 10% of it to Yahweh. So the Levi'im, the Levites, collect a 10% tithe from the people, then they pay a 10% tithe on the part that falls to them. Thus, everyone pays tithe, the Levites and the people. Nobody gets out of paying tithe. Now let's move on to Leviticus 27:30. Our first word is the whole. It's and all. It's everything. Nothing's left out. It's totality. Masar. There's your word tithe. And all the tithe, haaretz, of the land. I won't be able to give you much because they're all nouns. Mizrah, seed, haaretz, the land. So all the tithe of the land, the seed that's planted in the land, everything that comes up from the seed. Mibri, of fruit, ha'etz, the fruit of the tree. So you're paying a tithe of the fruit of the tree. It says la Yahweh. It's to Yahweh. Hu, which means it, Kodesh, it is holy. Holiness, well, it is holy. A holy thing. Holy, something that is holy is something that's consecrated to God. A sanctuary, it's used in the holy tabernacle of the temple. Things that are set apart for God. Those things are holy. So 1/10 of everything that is your increase. And they use examples of you put the seed in the ground, and from everything that grows out of that ground, 1/10 of that automatically belongs to God. If it grows on your fruit trees, 1/10 of it belongs to God. If you drive a bus, 1/10 of that check you get is the seed that you planted. Driving the bus is the seed that you planted. And the fruit that comes from that is the check that you receive, right? And so you pay 1/10 off of the top. You don't say, okay, well, the taxes have to come out and the bills have to come out, and this is what I'm left with, so I pay 10th on that. No, that's not what God said. He said 1/10 of all of it, the whole thing, the gross. And it goes to Yahweh. That belongs to God. And they call him by name so that you're sure that there's not part of it goes to Buddha and part of it goes to Krishna. And no, it's Yahweh. 1/10 of everything belongs to Yahweh. So my translation is, and tithe from all the seed of the land and all the fruit of the trees. It is holy to Yahweh. So nothing is holy today and unholy tomorrow. If it is holy, it is always holy. The ark of God wasn't just holy only when it was in the Hay Hall, in the temple, right? Or in the Mishkan, the tabernacle, right? It's always been holy. It's still holy wherever it is. Just as the uh, Pelitim, the Philistines, who came down with a really bad case of hemorrhoids when they treated it unholy, right? They treated it in an unholy manner, and they paid a price for that because it was holy, even though it wasn't in the temple. The tithe will always be holy, which means that the tithe is forever, not just when the hay hall is standing. It's not, there is no such thing as temporary holiness. If 10% is set aside for God at the foundation of the world, which it was, it will be set aside for God through all eternities. It will always be holy. There will never be a time or a reason for it not to be holy. If that time ever comes, then it was never holy in the first place. Hopefully you follow my point. Our next verse is Leviticus 27:32, and our first word is, again, the whole, which is all. Masar, there's your tithe word. Bakar, which is herd. Zone, and flock. So the zone is actually sheep. So it's the sheep from the herd. Kol, all asher, that ya'avor, that passes. That's what passes over, like the streams passing over the land, because they're overflowing, or a person walking across the stream because he's passing over from one side to the other. That's your word. There's tahat, and this is under ha shabet, the rod. So it's everything that goes under the rod. You remember the story of, it's Yitzhak, right? He was the one that married Rachel, or was it Rebecca? All of a sudden, I've lost my brain. The guy that had the stick and he would hit the sheep with it, pop them with the sheep, and then they'd have more sheep somehow. Still don't know how that worked, but all that passed under the rod. The rod is the tribe. They use the word rod. This is the word they use for tribes in the tribes of Israel, the 12 tribes of Israel, the Shevet, because each of the tribal leaders had a rod. So there's your word there. Everything that passes under the rod. Ha'asiri, the 10th part of that, yiyeh, will be Kodesh. It will be holy. It'll be a thing that's consecrated to God, to La Yahweh, to Yahweh. Here's the translation. And tithe from every herd and from everything that passes under the rod, the tithe is holy to Yahweh. Again, if something is holy, it is always holy. We cannot say that we keep the Shabbat holy if we don't celebrate it. Thus, we cannot keep the tithe holy if we don't give it. Okay. One other thing that I want to mention here is that we say, well, he said seed that grows out of the ground and fruit that grows off of the tree and sheep that go under the rod, that's it. I don't have to pay tithe if I'm a computer programmer, if I'm an engineer, if I'm a astronaut, if I'm a, I mean, not, if I'm a doctor, if I'm a bus driver, whatever, right? No, these are examples. We can't take this. This was not meant that this is all you ever do, because there were people who did things other than raise animals. Because it's the argument they always give is, well, oh, the Jews did that back then. You had bankers, did you not? You had lawyers, did you not? You had people of every kind of this, that, and the other. And what you raised, let's say you raised peas on your land because God didn't allow you to raise but one thing. You weren't allowed to have different things. And I think the reason behind that was so that you would take part of what you got and trade it for the other things that you needed. So if you were the guy that raised peas, you were going to trade some of it for corn and some of it for lettuce and some of it for sheep and some of it for milk and some of it for cheese. You follow what I'm saying? This is what makes a community interact. That's why God didn't allow us to mix them. So there were people that did all kinds of different things. There were blacksmiths, there were carpenters, there were stonemasons. They didn't have time to raise sheep. They didn't have time to have fruit trees and harvest. And are you following what I'm saying? These were examples to tell you. It was just idiomatically telling you that it's a 10% of all of the increase, not part of it, not the net, but the gross. 10% of that is holy. It always has been. It always will be. It will always belong to Yahweh. All right, so let's move on. Malachi, chapter 3, 7 through 12 says, even from the days of your fathers, you are gone away from mine, or from my ordinances, and have not kept them. Wow, from the very beginning, from the time of Abraham, Yitzhak, and Yaakov, you have not been following my laws. Return to me, God said, and I will return to you. What does that sound like? Draw near to God and he'll draw near to you. So he says, return to me and I will return to you, says Yahweh of hosts. But you said, what shall we return? Can a man rob God? Yet you have robbed me, God said. But you say, what have we stolen from you? God's answer, in tithe and offerings. You are cursed with a curse. Ooh. So if you don't pay your tithe and offering, you are cursed with a curse. For you have robbed me, God said. Even this whole nation has done it. That doesn't mean that every single person in it. That just means that the vast majority. Because again, it's Hebrew. They don't talk like we do. Nothing is literal here. Bring you all the tithe, he said, into the storehouse, that there may be meat in my house. Improve me now herewith, says Yahweh of hosts, if I will not open you the window of heaven and pour you out a blessing. And this is a little bit of a stretch on the English, but it's okay. It says that there shall not be room enough to receive it. It's kind of what they meant by that. Verse 11, and I will rebuke the devourer for your sake, and he shall not destroy the fruits of your ground, neither shall your vine cast her fruit before the time in the field, says Yahweh of hosts. Boy, this is so important because, again, boy, you're out of luck. If you don't have if you think this is all about having sheep and trees and plants in the ground, if you don't have that, then you can't pay the tithe and you're cursed no matter what you do. Come on, get real here. What we do in life, that's what we're planning in life, and that's what we're receiving from. So we have to keep that in mind. We have to understand that whatever it is we do in life, this is what God's talking about. And if we don't give that 10% off the top, we're cursed. But if we do give that 10%, then look what God does. He rebukes the devourer. If you've been eaten by the devourer, maybe you should ask yourself, are you paying your tithe? I'm just saying. And if you're not paying your tithe, why are you not paying your tithe? Are you not planting something where you'll receive? That could be, if you don't plant, you're probably not going to receive something, right? So there could be a problem. Or you're planting it and you're receiving it and hoarding it all, or are you spending your money foolishly? I mean, you got to look into this. Why? Because if you don't start paying them, God's not going to rebuke the devourer for your sake. He said he'll do it if you pay it. And he says if you pay it, then God's not going to let the enemy destroy that thing that you receive your sustenance from. Your enemy won't be able to do that. And your fruit won't come before its time. Well, think about that. If you have fruit trees and all of that stuff starts to blossom before the last freeze, what's going to happen? You're going to lose your fruit, right? There's a couple of key words in this verse. Robbed is koveim. It's plural, of course. You have robbed me and robbed me and robbed me and robbed me and robbed me. It's never just a one-time thing. And so what is the point? I thought there was two words in here, but apparently there's only one. What is the point then? No one is exempt from giving 10% of their increase to God because 10% is set aside. In other words, it's holy to God. If we don't give it, we are in fact stealing it. God did not slap himself on the forehead one day and say, gee, I didn't see that coming. I thought the temple was going to be there forever. I didn't know that Nebuchadnezzar was going to do it. I didn't know the Romans were going to do it in 70. I just didn't see that coming. Come on, people. We know better. God knew that the temple was going to be destroyed, and he made no exception for these rules based on the non-existence of a temple. And by the way, when he gave the law, there wasn't a temple. Deuteronomy 12, verses 5 through 6. For to the place which Yahweh your God chooses from all your tribes to put his name, there to his dwelling shall you seek, and there shall you go. And there you shall bring your burnt offerings and your sacrifices and your tithe. Burnt offerings and sacrifices and tithe. And the heave offering from your hand and your vows and your freewill offerings and the firstborn of your herd of all your flocks. And anything else that hasn't been mentioned. That's what that means. It's idiomatic. The place where God is worshipped, studied, taught is the place where God's name exists. Let's look at something from the Sepharim Shelahim from the New Testament. This is my translation of the Greek. We're going to look at Levi or Matthew chapter 22. I'm going to start with verse 15. I'll give you a second if you want to get there. 1001. Okay, your second is up. Anyway, Matthew 22:15. Then went the Parashim. Who are they? Pharisees, to take counsel how they might trap him in words. And they sent to him their Talmudim, their disciples, with the Herodion, saying, More, or teacher, we know that you are true, and you teach the Torah, that's the way of God. You teach the Torah honestly, the way of God, in truth. That means he teaches it honestly. He teaches the Torah honestly, is teaching the way of God in truth. And that you do not delight, you do not chefetz, you do not delight in one person over another. For you show no favoritism. That's what they mean by you do not regard the appearance of men. That doesn't mean if someone's good looking, you help them out, and if they're ugly, you don't. No. Do not regard the appearance of men means you don't show favoritism. 17. Tell us, therefore, what you think. Is it Torah observant? Is it lawful? Is it Torah observant to give taxes to Caesari or not? And that's hysterical because they knew that nobody liked paying taxes to the Caesar. Nobody. They like it because you're giving 20 to 23% of your income to the temple, and now you got to pay tithe or a tax to Caesar as well. People did not like this. Verse 18, but Yeshua knew their wickedness and said, why are you hypocrites testing me? Show me the tax money. And they brought him a silver coin. I wonder if he kept it. Just anyway, Yeshua said, whose image and inscription is this? They said, Caesaros. Then he said, render to Caesari, Caesaros, and to God, God's. So render to Caesar that which belongs to Caesar, and render to God that which belongs to God. And they marveled at what they heard and left him and went their way. In other words, he shut them down real fast. They thought they had him. They thought if he says you got to pay taxes, everybody here is going to say, boo, hiss. And if he says you don't have to pay taxes, they're going to say, wait, but the Torah says you do. So they thought no matter what he did, they had him. And then he went just slightly over the radar. He outsmarted them. How does all this affect the Goy, the Gentile? Well, paying the tithe is mandated by the covenant between God and the Yehudim, God and the Jews, because he made his covenant with the Jews. Hopefully everybody knows that. The Goyim, the Gentiles, are grafted into the same covenant, and they are therefore subject to the same rules. The Goyim, the Gentiles, do not now, nor have they ever had a different covenant than the Yehudim. That is Catholic rhetoric, not biblical truth. The only covenant that offers eternal life was made with the Yehudim. It was made with the Jews. Do we have to pay tithe? Yes, we do. It belongs to God, and his ministers are to determine what is done with the proceeds, not some board of elders or some self-proclaimed televangelist. They have nothing to do with this. Okay, Rob, you're not a Levite, so why should we give to your ministry or any other non-Levite? It's a fair question. In the 1st century CE, the roaming rabbi, that's rabbi in our world, became very popular. And in those days, the Yehudi, the Jewish people from the towns in which these rabbim, rabbis lived, along with those who followed them, provided for their every need. The town they came from and the people who followed the rabbis provided for their every need. They received money, food, clothing, lodging, you name it. If they needed it, these people provided it. And they did this based on the Torah, by the way. This help came after the tithe, not before. After the tithe and offerings were made to the Hayhal, to the temple. However, as time went on, the Yehudim and Goyim, followers of Yeshua, began to give their tithe and offering to their synagogues and to their rabbim, because they knew the tithe was holy and still had to be given to the place where God's name is. Do we pay tithe on our gross or our net? I think we know the answer. Deuteronomy 14:22 says, you shall truly tithe all Remember, that's totality. Coal, everything, nothing left out. All the increase of your seed that the field brings forth year by year. This is gross, not net. What if we can't pay all our tithe? Well, you're going to have to pay as much as you can and make sure that you are on the road to paying it all. Come back to him, and he will come back to you. Shalom, Beshalom.